You probably know the difference between a station wagon and a hatchback, right? Well, how about a landaulet and a Brougham? Yeah, didn't think so. In today's episode, we're taking a look at all the different car styles out there. Big boys, small boys, pointy boys, everything in between. We're gonna give you the tools to identify different body styles, examine how they've evolved over time, and get to the bottom of why they're called what they're called. We're gonna keep this video to passenger vehicles, okay? Because commercial vehicles, motorcycles, vans, and trucks could be their own episodes entirely. But today, it's all about cars. I want to give a huge thanks to Keeps for sponsoring this episode of WheelHouse. No one really talks about it, but it's a fact that 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. I have what my mom has described as wonderfully thick and beautiful hair, but who knows how long these luscious locks are gonna last. I'm actually kind of nervous. When it comes to hair loss, prevention is key. And now, thanks to Keeps, I can maintain all the hair I already have and prevent hair loss without even going to the doctor. I can just visit a doctor online. They prescribe hair loss prevention medication, and it's delivered right to my doorstep every 3 months. And Keeps is super affordable too. They offer the only 2 FDA-approved generic hair loss products out there. You may have tried them before, but never at this low of a price. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss today, head on over to keeps.com/wheelhouse50 or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/wheelhouse and the number 50. Thank you, Keeps. Support the companies that support Donut, and take care of your hair. Now back to the show. Okay, so let's dive in with the car style most people are familiar with, the sedan. The main features of a conventional sedan are 4 doors, a 3-box configuration, a closed body, meaning a fixed roof, and the ability to comfortably seat 4 or 5 passengers between 2 rows. Sedans get their name from this cool-ass way to roll into a party. Wheelless, human-powered contraptions have been around forever, and they're called something different all over the world. But in Britain, in the 1630s, a sophisticated version emerged called a sedan chair, or just a sedan. Some people think sedans were named after the French town of Sedan, but most of my etymologist homies think it simply derives from the Italian verb sedere, meaning to sit. There are differing opinions about who first used the word sedan in reference to a car body. Some credit it to the Studebaker 4 and 6 models, which were marketed as sedans in 1912. Others attribute it to Speedwell, a short-lived auto manufacturer based in Dayton, Ohio, who in 1911 used sedan to describe their new closed-body 2-door car. Sedans are some of the most recognizable cars of the modern age. Sedans are so ubiquitous that before Australia and New Zealand adopted the term, they simply called sedans cars. This brings me to our next car style, the coupe, or the coupe, or the coupe, depending on how you pronounce it. I say coupe because I'm a red-blooded American and can't say words like tutor, and because coupe sounds like a toupee for your car, and that makes me itchy. It gives me hives just thinking about it. Like sedans, coupes have a fixed roof and a 3-box configuration, but are sportier and more compact, with 2 doors and a sloping or truncated rear roofline. Like a lot of car terms, the word coupe comes from our horse-drawn carriage predecessors. Stemming from the French verb couper, meaning to cut, a coupe was a type of clipped carriage that seated 2 instead of 4, with its rear-facing seats essentially cut off, hence the name. The coupe body style has also given way to many variations as it's evolved. The sportiest of the already sporty coupes is the Berlinetta, introduced in the 1930s and popularized by Ferrari in the 1950s. On the other end of the spectrum is the business coupe, which had massive trunk space in lieu of a back seat. They became super popular with traveling salesmen. Everyone knows the Deuce Coupe, and who could forget the Cozy Coupe? Sedans and coupes may seem very different, so how has the line between them gotten so blurred? Well, you can thank car makers for getting willy freaking nilly with their naming conventions in the second half of the 20th century. The confusion started once manufacturers released coupes with a 2-in-2 body style, that is, 2 proper seats up front with 2 tiny little seats in the back. Then in the early 2000s, car makers were like, Oh, this whole 2 and 2 thing not confusing enough for you? Well, check out these new 4-door cars that we're gonna call coupes, because we love chaos and nothing matters. Mercedes had their CLS class, Mazda had their RX-8 with the suicide doors on the back. These quad coupes are at the heart of an age-old debate. Can you have a 4-door coupe and a 2-door sedan, or does it defeat the purpose of terms altogether? You know what I'm gonna say? I'm gonna say yeah. It does. Why use words if you're gonna take away their meaning? That's messed up. I'm looking at you, BMW. Let's take a look at the 4-doored BMW X6. With its sleek roofline, you can see why it's marketed as a sports activity coupe. But that car is as much of a coupe as Dr. Phil is a real doctor. Yeah, he's not a doctor. Let's move on to the station wagon, also known as an estate car. Unlike the 3-box design of the sedan and the coupe, station wagons have a long-bodied 2-box configuration. This means its passengers and cargo areas are in one joined cabin, with the rear tailgate hinged to allow for easy access to all that junk in the trunk. The names station wagon and estate car harken back to these vehicles' original uses in the early 1900s, which was to transport travelers and their luggage between railway stations and country estates. So station wagons actually began as commercial vehicles before making their way into suburban life. Fancy that. These first generation station wagons are a great example of early custom work, because it's not like you could just purchase one off the lot in 1910. Cab drivers with Ford Model Ts looking for more cargo space would have independent coach builders produce custom wooden bodies for their existing chassis. These converted wood-bodied Model Ts were known as woodies. Eventually, car makers got wise and started making their own station wagons. The first one assembled on a manufacturer's production line was the 1923 Star 4 Model C station wagon. Pretty dang cute, right? As time went on, manufacturers improved upon wooden bodies and replaced them with steel. The 1935 Chevy Suburban was the first all-steel station wagon body, and by the early 50s, most other companies churning out station wagons had followed suit. Station wagon and estate models sold well in the 60s and 70s, but were eventually eclipsed by other family-style cars in the 80s and 90s, like the minivan and the crossover SUV. Related to the station wagon is one of my personal favorites, the shooting brake. Now, all my carriage heads out there will know that a shooting brake was originally a horse-drawn wagon used to cart around shooting parties along with all their guns and ammo, and I imagine alcohol. This was back in the 1890s, but shooting brakes eventually came to mean a body style that combines the station wagon and the coupe. This was especially prevalent in the 60s and 70s. Companies offered these kind of 2-door elongated sport coupes like the 65 Aston Martin DB5 shooting brake. Other companies offered the same body style but didn't call it a shooting brake, like the Reliant Scimitar GTE, which sounds like a car from GTA. This style of car kind of disappeared for a while, but made a comeback in the 2000s. One of the coolest and weirdest looking of the bunch was nicknamed the Clown Shoe. It was the BMW Z3 M Coupe. And you can see why. Challenging the conventional definition, the later 2012 Mercedes-Benz CLS class shooting brake had 4 doors instead of 2. And the more recent shooting brakes, the 2018 Porsche Panamera Sport Turismo and Ferrari's first production 4-wheel drive model, the FF. People go apeshit for the FF, myself included. Also, the Panamera Turismo and that Mercedes, just call them wagons, guys, come on. It's nearly impossible to talk about station wagons without bringing up the hatchback, named for its hatch-type rear door that opens upwards. Lots of early hatchbacks were actually marketed as small station wagons, like BMC's 1959 Countryman version of the Aston A40 Farina, predecessor to one of the most iconic hot hatches in history, the Renault 5 Turbo. The hatchback design actually dates back to the 1930s with the Citroën 11 CV Commercial, but the term hatchback didn't appear until the 70s, when the cars really took off as popular small utilitarian vehicles, especially in Europe. Maybe the most well-known hatchback is the Volkswagen Golf, designed by the juggernaut genius Giorgetto Giugiaro, who in 1999 was named Car Designer of the Century. The Mark I Golf hit the scene in 1974 as VW's next big thing since the Beetle. Before long, it became standard for car companies to release hatchback versions of their most popular models. The hatch door style has even made its way into luxury vehicles like the BMW 5 Series Gran Turismo and the Audi A7. If you've ever heard a hatchback referred to as a 3-door or a 5-door, it's because the hatch is considered its own door in addition to the 2 or 4 existing passenger doors. Makes sense. That being said, what we see nowadays are more often the 5-door versions, especially in the US. We just don't like small cars for some reason, even though our cities are quite packed and parking's a nightmare. Okay, big stretch now. Oh. Because we're about to talk limos. The luxurious, lengthy limousine is popular with presidents, celebrities, and horny teenagers going to prom. It's driven by a chauffeur with a partition between the driver and the passenger compartments. Limos and stretch limos are made by converting the bodies of existing models. In the US, the most common conversions are cars like the Town Car, the Navigator, the Cadillac XTS, and the Escalade, the Chrysler 300, and the Hummer H2. Entrepreneurial car nuts have even converted semis into the biggest functional limos in the world, but the longest limo of all time would have to be the 100-foot long, 26-wheeled American Dream. Just look at this honker. Now look again, and this time, notice that there's a freaking helicopter on the back of it. It was created in 1992 by this dude, Jay Orberg, who was known for building movie cars like the DeLorean and Back to the Future. And the American Dream was both awe-inspiring and completely impractical. It was virtually undrivable and eventually fell into disrepair, but not before garnering the Guinness Book of World Records title of world's longest car. Well done, Jay. Like coupe, the word limousine is all wrapped up in carriage culture. It originally comes from the name of the French region Limousin, where the shepherds wore a distinctive type of cloak with a raised hood. The roof that extended over the driver's seat on early limousines resembled that hood, which is how it's got its name. Originally, limos without a hood over the driver were called Broughams. Cadillac was the first to make a motorized Brougham in 1916. But, like most cars in this video, the meaning of Brougham has changed since the early days. Take the classic Cadillac Brougham land boat from the 1970s, a perfect example of Brougham being used on a car that doesn't actually feature this driver-exposed passenger enclosed body style that Brougham actually means. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, car companies would use Brougham to specify an upper trim level of a particular model. Chrysler did it with its New Yorker, Ford did it with its Ford Torino. So when it comes to car styles, the name Brougham can be a little tricky, but here's one that couldn't be any more straightforward. The Microcar. It's a car that's micro. These tiny vehicles have little baby engines, generally 700 cubic centimeters or smaller, many of which were originally designed for motorcycles. It's for that reason that many early microcars didn't even have the capability to go backwards. Microcars can either be 4-wheeled like the BMW Isetta or 3-wheeled like the microest of the micro, the PLP 50. Oh my god. Microcars cropped up after World War II, initially in Germany and the UK as an alternative to the motorcycle with better weather protection. One of the first to appear was the 1949 Bond minicar. This looks like something you'd buy your rich-ass kid. It only weighed about 300 pounds, used a mere 50cc engine. One of the rarest microcars is the 1950s egg-shaped Bruch Mopetta. Mopetta, baby! Only 14 of these things were ever produced, and just 5 of them remain today. But when the Mini busted on the scene in 1959, microcar customers traded in their one-seaters for these roomier, more powerful vehicles that were still small and affordable. In the 90s, however, microcars made a little bit of a comeback with the itty-bitty Smart 42. Another styling variation that can dramatically affect the overall look of a car is the fastback. A fastback has a single, unbroken slope from the roof to the rear bumper that makes the car more sleek and aerodynamic. The precursor to modern-day fastbacks are the teardrop-shaped cars of the 1930s, and by the early 40s, you can get a fastback body style from nearly every domestic manufacturer. Fastbacks are usually coupes, but can be sedans, like the old VW Bugs. An early fastback example is this stunning Bugatti Type 57 Atlantic, an extremely rare car. There's only a few of them in the world. One of them changed hands in 2010 for $40 million. Later fastbacks include the classic 67 Mustang, like the Bullitt Mustang, the Mark I Plymouth Barracuda, the Kia Stinger is a fastback, and of course the Porsche 911, which has continuously maintained its fastback appearance from its debut in 1963 to today. Very impressive. Fastbacks can get confused with notchbacks, but the term notchback actually implies a horizontal trunk lid. It's usually reserved for distinguishing from fastback models of the same car. Like in the 1970s, there's a Chevy Vega, which came in both. Then Then there's the Camback, also known as the camtail or K-tail. This automotive styling feature evolved out of an early need for aerodynamic improvement on cars. A camback slopes downward like a fastback, but then abruptly cuts vertically down. It's like a fastback with the butt cut off. The most common camback out there has to be the Toyota Prius, but the coolest is probably the Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe. The design, developed and named after German aerodynamicist Wunderwald Kamm in the 1930s, was found to minimize drag, reduce fuel consumption, and provide more vehicle stability at higher speeds. It was adding a camback to the race car that finally allowed Ford to surpass Ferrari at Le Mans. Notable cambacks since then include the Ferrari 250 GTO of the 60s, the Datsun 240Z, and technically Tesla's latest Model Y. You know that car body that's narrow at the center with a rounded front end and a voluptuous back end? I'm not talking about the peanut mobile. I'm talking about what you'd wash that big rock hard peanut down with. A refreshing bottle of Coke. Coke bottle styling can either be accomplished by pinching the waist of a car or adding more pronounced curves over the front and back wheel arches. Unlike other styles based on horse-drawn carriages, the Coke bottle design was inspired by aeronautics and the pinch-waisted fuselage of supersonic jets. The styling was named for its resemblance to a classic contoured Coke bottle laying on its side. It's not a far stretch actually, seeing as both the bottle and the car style were developed by industrial design legend Raymond Loewy. Like, I knew it was similar, but I didn't realize it was the same guy. The man designed everything from cars to toasters to stamps to jukeboxes to coffee shops to airplane interiors. That's called range, people. He introduced the stylish new Coke bottle body in 1962 on the Studebaker Avanti Gran Turismo. Chevy followed a year later with its 63 Corvette Stingray and dramatized the styling in their 68 Corvette. It got even more widespread in the 70s as Nissan, Mitsubishi, and Toyota offered Coke bottle styling on multiple models. A more recent example is the Dodge Challenger, which was also one of the first Coke bottle style cars back in the 70s, and frankly my favorite. I'm so glad they kept it for the current one. A whole different class of cars are convertibles. If I've learned one thing about convertibles, it's that you've got to keep some sunscreen in the glove box. If I've learned two things about convertibles, it's that there are so many different names for convertibles. First, let's get the basics down, okay? A convertible is a car with a roof that can be folded down or removed. Most are two-door models, although four-door convertibles do exist. You can get a hardtop convertible whose retractable roof is made of steel, aluminum, or plastic, or a soft top made of materials like vinyl or canvas. The age-old question is, though, what's the difference between a convertible and a cabriolet? And honestly, it's not much. Cabriolet is essentially just a European term for convertible. It comes from the name of, you guessed it, an old carriage which had a top that could be pulled up or left down depending on the weather, but both terms can be used interchangeably and only nerds will get mad about it. You know what, to settle it once and for all, let's just call them convertibles, okay? Rolls right off the tongue. Then you have the Roadster, also known as a Spider or Spider with a Y, which is pretty much the same thing as a convertible / cabriolet, just fancier sounding. Technically, a true Roadster has 2 seats and no weather protection whatsoever. The terms Roadster and Spider can be used interchangeably, but they have very different origins, okay? Roadster comes from an old American term for a good traveling horse. Partner. Spider, with a Y, on the other hand, gets its name from, don't worry, it's not actually, yes, it is a carriage, from the 1800s, and it looked very spidery. This 2-door carriage perched high on some abnormally large wheels was also called a phaeton. It was faster and more dangerous than others at the time, and therefore used more for sport than actual travel. Modern day roadsters have kept alive this emphasis on sportiness and style over safety and functionality. Many original roadsters and spiders eventually evolved to have a roof and window options, which led to the terms roadster, spider, convertible, and cabrio all kind of meshing together. And then the fact that spider is spelled with an I and a Y just adds to the confusion. A good rule of thumb to keep those straight is that if a car is Italian, it's almost always spelled with an I, and that's because Italians don't have the letter Y in their alphabet. Cool. Another class of open-top 2-seat sports cars is the Barchetta. See how it kind of looks like a skiff or a speedboat? Unsurprising, since barchetta is Italian for little boat. A barchetta is like a roadster in that it's compact and truly topless, but instead of a full windshield, it has a short, transparent wind deflector, which I know sounds like the same thing as a windshield, but it's not. There's already a lot of convertible-esque cars, and we haven't even gotten to the semi-convertibles yet, like the Landaulet. With a name like that, you best believe it used to be a carriage, okay? Opposite from the Brougham though, where the driver was exposed and the passengers covered, a Landaulet has a fixed roof over the driver's portion, but an adjustable convertible top over the back for the passengers. They often have a partition that separates the driver from the passengers, similar to limousines, but these guys really never became popular as a daily vehicle. These were the kind of cars that political figures would use at political processions, but that didn't really last due to security concerns. A way cooler and more prevalent semi-convertible is the Targa top. It's sort of like a convertible coupe. The back portion of the roof is fixed, but there's a removable or collapsible panel over the front seats. Even though it wasn't the first car to have removable roof panels, the 1966 Porsche 911 Targa popularized the style. It was named for the Targa Florio, a Sicilian road race that Porsche had recently done very well at. All types of cars can have Targa tops, but because Porsche trademarked the name, manufacturers just can't call it that. The ND Miata RFs have a Targa style roof, as well as the C4 Corvette. Some people think that you can interchange T-top and Targa top, but there's actually a bit of a difference, because T-tops have a rigid, non-removable bar running from front to the back, called the T-bar. Arguably, the shapiest of car shapes is the wedge car. Some of the most iconic pointy boys like the DeLorean DMC-12, the Lancia Stratos, and the Lamborghini Countach emerged in the 70s and 80s. True wedge cars were more futuristic concept cars or experimental racing cars that weren't really practical, though a few of them did make it to production. The grandfather of the wedge car is the same guy who designed the Mark I Golf. The man of many G's, Giorgetto Giugiaro. My back hurts. Oh. Now, it seems insane to go from something as cool as a wedge car to something as aggressively normal as an SUV, but that's what we're gonna do. An SUV's defining features are raised ground clearance, a higher ride height, four-wheel drive, and off-roading capabilities beyond its function as a passenger car. They sometimes have two doors like the old Bronco or Blazer, or four doors like most SUVs today. There was a time when SUVs were produced with a body-on-frame style, where the separate body was mounted onto the chassis of a light truck. This method differentiates SUVs from crossovers, which are smaller but similar vehicles with less off-road capabilities and get better fuel economy, which use unibody construction and a car-based platform. A perfect crossover example is the mid-90s Toyota RAV4, which really opened this type of vehicle up to the market segment. But now that SUVs are frequently being produced with unibody construction, the delineation is kind of moot, and SUV has basically become a catch-all term that includes crossovers. Alright, so that's it. Those are the different kinds of car bodies I've got for you today. Let me know in the comments if there's one that I didn't really cover and that you'd like to hear more about, like trucks. Guys, make sure you subscribe to Donut. We put out a show every day. It's pretty crazy. We're all going a little insane because of it, but that's fine. We do it for you. Follow Donut at Donut Media. Follow me at Nolan J. Sykes on Instagram and Twitter. Be kind. See you next time.